Hello again, this is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. I just want to express to you how much I deeply resent having to brush my hair, put on a shirt, do the lighting, all the rest that I have to do to produce up to your standards here. But at the same time, I do want to acknowledge the fact that I don't have to put on a certain number of buttons to go to work. I don't have to have a uniform. I don't have to, I'm not going to be judged ultimately or fired based on my appearance here. And there are so many out there who are, and I want to acknowledge those people. So with that in mind, I'd like to move on here to the next thing in our phase of the police are outside of your house. They're issuing tickets for profit. It's a nuisance to you. It's a nuisance to the neighborhood. It's just shouldn't be happening. What do you do about it? Okay, so in our last video, we were looking at getting public records, massing documents here, getting information, sort of acquiring intelligence. Okay, so we're going to assume now that you've got a document in your hands that says to you, we are going to Sergeant so-and-so, you need to go get more money because you've got a quota. Something along those lines, a smoking gun, in other words. Okay, well, great. And then my guess is here is you've probably taken it to the local news department, whatever that, I guess it's not a government agency. It just seems like it sometimes. But the local news, you've probably tried to put this out on Facebook. You've probably tried to get the word out here. This document looks to you like a smoking gun, but nobody else is seeming to understand that. Okay, so what do you do there? How do you get your point across? Well, the point of this video is you've got a document and you need to turn that document into demands. Okay, so one of the first things I would do if you came to me on any subject whatsoever, I would say something like, if I had a magic wand and could wave it, what would you want to happen at the end of this process? Okay, what do you want? That's what I'm asking. So that in order to make demands, you've got to ask yourself, what do you want? Okay, the first thing we did was identify the problem. The second thing we did was try to gather intelligence. Now the third thing, we're going to articulate demands. That's what we're doing here now, okay? So I think simply speaking, we can say, I want the police to stop issuing tickets outside of my house, okay? Well, is that good enough? Do you want that to stop there? What if they go move 2 blocks down the road? Okay, so you got to look at that. Well, maybe I want the police to stop issuing tickets for profit. Okay, well, then what's the implication of that? Where are they going to, do they need the tax money? Are they going to get it somewhere else? What is the revenue, I guess I should say, as opposed to tax money? Where are they going to get that revenue from? If not, is there going to be a problem? These are things that need to be thought out before you make a demand. That's why we're getting intelligence first. So maybe the local mayor is completely devoted to this, and you're not going to get this problem solved until you get rid of the mayor. Okay, so maybe your demand really is the mayor's got to go. I don't know. In the escrow case, I can tell you, for example, the mayor's gone, the police chief is gone, but there still is the city administrator, and that governmental unit, the city administrator, is really the person making the decisions. The mayor ultimately is the figurehead who's working a couple hours a week, but the person who's working full-time and ordering everybody else around and now has their hands in the police department is the city administrator. So maybe your demands are that the city administrator has to go. I don't know. But again, the point is to identify the problem, gather intelligence, and start to build demands. Now, we're going to go on to the next stage here, I think, is building a coalition. But we're going to skip that for the time being. We're just going to focus on how to articulate your demands. So if I'm writing a demand letter, right, I've got fancy letterhead, I've got a law firm name, I've got my name, people may know who I am. When I'm sending a letter to somebody, they're getting more than just my words, okay? You may not have that there, so we're going to focus on your words. I think that you should be able to get a fairly good template anywhere off the internet for just letter template. You're going to want to have your date. You're going to want to have your name. You're going to want to identify. You're going to want it to look like a regular letter, not be in crayon. Why? Because the more normal that you do things, the more easily it is for people to accept them. If somebody's expecting a business letter on letterhead, printed on white paper, cardstock maybe, and in black ink, and you hand them a yellow piece of paper with purple crayon, that is going to be unusual to them, and they're going to suspect whatever the message is. It's just a fact. So part of the reason in law why lawyers try to make all of their documents look professional and the same is because we want to have the judge focusing on the facts of our case and to have their decision be easy, right? They're exercising their power, their discretion on your behalf, and so sometimes you really need to say pretty please. Well, if you're saying pretty please, you're not going to do that in a weird way. Why? Because you want to make the decision maker's job. You're going to acknowledge that they have power, but you're also going to make their job easier. So that accomplishes both of those things. But let's just say we're writing the mayor here. It's the same sort of principle. You're going to want them to accept that you're not coming out of left field. Okay? And I also want to distinguish here, because this is part of the trap, between where you can be as a lawyer and what you can do as somebody who's not a lawyer, okay? Now, there's no question that the law is supposed to be written in a way that ordinary people can use it. Well, but that's just not the case. And I think everybody here who's watching that knows that it's simply my signature as an attorney is going to have a lot more weight than somebody's signature who's not an attorney. Fine. It's also the case that if you start citing cases, case law, no matter how right you are, that people are going to be suspicious of that for similar reasons, because they're expecting an attorney to be the one to be providing the case law. And frankly, they're not going to be reading the case law, especially if it's a mayor or somebody like that. They're probably going to get somebody else's opinion on it. So whatever argument that you're making there is really going to go above their head, because as far as the mayor's concerned, he's not the lawyer. She's not the lawyer. They're going to have somebody else give them that information and argue with you on that. So what powers do you have? And the law is so tempting to use. You've got it in black and white. You've got, you should, I think, rightfully feel that you've got leverage. If the law says they've got to do X, then they should be doing X. And you should have a right to rely on that and not have to pay an attorney and a bunch of people a bunch of money and go through all this rigmarole. That's absolutely true. But one of the reasons all that happens is you get yourself into the legal track, and you may want to be in the political track. So we're going to focus here first on making political arguments to politicians. And I can't stress that enough. If you are making a demand letter to a mayor, just for example, councilman, somebody whose job depends on them getting elected, the law is not going to be what's going to move them. The fact that you represent 200 people on the South Side, or that this issue is very important to Hmong people, and your district, you can't get elected without the Hmong vote. It's those kind of touchstones, those kind of points of persuasion that are going to be much more effective to a politician than the law. Okay? So with all that in mind, all a demand letter really is, it's got three things. Number one, you're going to identify who you are. Okay? You might just be you. Now, it might be you or your family. It might be you in a group of 20 people or 2,000, or I don't know. Obviously, the more you have, the better, but you want to be very specific about who you are and who you represent. If you don't represent 200 people and you really represent 20 people, You might lose a lot of credibility if you make it seem like you represent 200 if you don't. Okay? You may be only speaking for you. And that's fine, because a committed person who's actually taking the time to research and write a letter to the mayor, many politicians know that those people represent other people, even if they don't necessarily do that directly, because a lot of people are going to feel the same way. Just one person is going to have courage to go write the letter. Okay? So that's, courage, have the time. There's a lot of factors that come into play. So I think you need to keep in mind that you probably are representative of a bigger audience, but you just don't want to speak for anybody that you're not authorized to speak for. That's something that attorneys are very sensitive to, just in general, but I think it's something you want to take in mind. So the first thing you're going to want to do is identify who you are and who you're speaking on behalf of, if anybody. It could just be everybody who lives in my house at, 3070 North Elm Street, okay? Where the police just happen to be causing a nuisance by pulling everybody over all the time. We can't get any sleep at night because there's all these red and blue lights outside our house. Okay, so the second thing you want to do is you want to identify what the problem is. And again, I can't stress enough that you want to use language that merely identifies the problem, doesn't identify blame. Okay, you'll have plenty of opportunity to do that down the road. And as I always say, you don't want to ratchet things up at the beginning, because then you don't have anywhere else to go. And you sort of box yourself into a corner, and all you can do is escalate, escalate, escalate. You want to go slowly up that road here, because not because you're feeling mercy, not because you're timid, not because you are scared, but because if you jump up to step 5, you're missing all the steps 2, 3, 4 in between, and those might be the ones that get you what you need. And you don't really want to go nuclear if you don't have to. Just a fact. Okay, because why? Your time is precious to you. So treat it like it is. Okay, so you can identify this issue in very generic terms. And for the example that we're saying here is, there is a problem with police officers pulling over people for profit. Okay? Now, then you're going to say, for example, I've got this document here between the police chief and Sergeant so-and-so, and the police chief is telling Sergeant so-and-so in no uncertain terms that they have a quota and they've got to get so many tickets. Well, now let's talk about the impacts. This is illegal, and it could cause liability for the city. Take that for what it's worth. It's also causing problems in my neighborhood. My neighbors are coming to me, and we're discussing with with my neighbors about how disruptive this practice is, how disruptive the sirens are, how disruptive the lights are. We don't feel that that's worth, and we'll get onto that second. So we're going to identify the main issue, just describe it. Police are pulling over people for profit in our neighborhood. It's causing, it's a nuisance. Okay, that's, I think, a fairly neutral way to describe this topic. Then you're going to go on to list out the harms to you personally, to the people that you represent. And then you're going to ask them, that's part of identifying the problem, is identifying the harms. Okay, my kids can't go to sleep. Children in the neighborhood are terrified because of the sirens. And we're worried about liability, because policing for profit only leads to problems. Besides being illegal, people are getting pulled over just trying to go home. So that's a problem. Okay, explain to the impacts on your neighborhood. Explain to why these people, voters, are getting pulled over in front of their house just on the way to going home from work. Why? Because the police need to get ticket money before they can go home. And they're assigned to my street. Okay? Bam. And you also want to keep in mind that because this is a public letter, because you're writing it to the mayor or whoever, it's a public official, it can be read by anybody. including your neighbor or anybody else, a court, a judge, anything. So you want to keep that in mind. Who's my audience? Who am I writing this to? Primarily, you're writing this to the politician, but you also want to know that your neighbors can look at it, right? So you can go door to door and talk to people. This is what I think the problem is. Here's this letter that I've written to the mayor. Will you join me? Okay? It can be extremely powerful because other people see you've already gone out there and you've written this letter and you've thought this through and you've thought the solution through. That really is going to be powerful to have them say, okay, this person's for real. Now, finally, you want to propose a solution. Okay? And here I think the solution really is some raised property taxes. I don't know. Maybe that's exactly what everybody wants. We've talked it over. Everybody in my neighborhood would prefer to have the property taxes raised than to have you generate income this way. Or we think that libraries are atrocious and we instead of doing this kind of policing, you should close down all the libraries. I don't know. But we're going to propose a solution here in order to, based on both the intelligence that we think is directed at something that they're going to go for and is something that we actually want. Okay, I don't know if you want to close down all the libraries or not, but the point is that you're engaging with them on their sort of decision-making process. So, we might think that maybe the best solution is to not have police give any citations at all and have them, focus on something else. Well, they're just not going to go for that. I mean, they're going to think you're a kook. So, and maybe that's absolutely right, and maybe they're wrong to think you're a kook. I don't know. But the point, what we're trying to do here is persuade. So we are trying to meet them on their grounds, right? You have to speak, when you're in France, you got to speak French. When you're speaking to bureaucrats, you might have to speak bureaucratese with bureaucrats, okay? So meet them on their ground and identify yourself, identify what the problem is, and propose a solution. Those are the three things. And I want to say, in my kind of demand letters, a solution it's absolutely appropriate to say, let's meet, let's negotiate. That is a perfectly legitimate proposed solution. I would like to, therefore, Mr. Mayor or Madam Mayor or whatever, Mr. Comptroller, I propose that we meet to discuss this matter. Please let me know when you're available. Or I look forward to I can settle these demands for, without recourse to court, but let's discuss this, and come up with a mutually acceptable resolution. So just some example of language there. So that's, again, the concept here is you're identifying who you are so that they know, because that's what they care about is who you are and what you represent. You're going to identify the problem, both so it shows that you understand it and so that you've communicated to them. And then finally, you're going to explain what it is that you want and how you think they can solve this problem, right? We're going again back to magic wand. So that, I think, is the main components of a demand letter from a citizen to a politician here. And it's good to express your demands in writing, and I encourage you to do so. So with that, stick with us and we'll keep you informed.